Hello everyone, Matthias is here, your trusted advisor. Today we will have a practical walkthrough applying Terraform to Microsoft Fabric. I've done the theoretical part on the architecture in a separate video. I will link it for you. And now we will have a practical look on that stuff. I've prepared everything and I will guide you through. This walkthrough is loosely based on some blog entries on the Microsoft Fabric blog, and I of course will link to this blog also in the description. I've shared my Visual Studio Code environment with you, and I've prepared all the scripts, and I will explain the scripts and execute the scripts where appropriate, and then we will see the result out of that scripts and see that everything works basically. So what's Terraform? Terraform is a desired state configuration management language. So basically you can define what you want to have and it will create exactly that resources, usually in Azure. So Terraform is made for hyperscale cloud environments like Azure, AWS, Google Cloud Platform. One special thing about Terraform is that it's cross-platform, but there is an extension for Terraform for Microsoft Fabric, developed by Microsoft in the last months. And it's very welcome because you can define your stuff, you can execute it, you can parameterize it, so you can reuse it for different projects, customers, and so on. And you can execute it several times. It will not create the sources. It will not create duplicates. And it's platform independent, so you can run it on cloud platforms as well as Windows, as well as Linux, as well as Mac. So I think it's a big benefit, to be honest. So it was an introduction. Of course, you have different options, like you can use Azure CLI and so on, but it's a bit different. In Terraform, you define the desired state, and Terraform will do everything to obtain this desired state. And when you define a command line, it's more like do this and do that. It's like a sequential command syntax that you provide. And if something fails in between, the chain of commands is kind of broken. So it's a little bit different, right? So let's have a look. So first of all, you need an app identity, and you need to give permissions from this app identity to the Terraform provider. I did that. Let's have a look at the script. There's a Terraform provider. There's a URI with the tenant ID. You need to obtain the tenant ID upfront, and then you can create the app registration and you can update the app registration. And then afterwards, you can use the app registration for authentication. App registration is like a user, but you give much more granular permissions. You give the permissions in not to objects like owner or reader or something like that, but to actions. So what and there the context, like it can read user profiles or it can write user profiles, something like that. So it's much more granular, and of course the passwords are very strong and very large. So you can do that by GUI in the Azure portal. But I think it's nicer to do it with code. And so this is the first script that we need to do, create the app identity. I did that already. And the next thing is that we can log into the Azure environment. So let's do that. AZ login. Now a web browser opens. I did. And now I've prepared the first Terraform script. It's a very basic Terraform script because when we have a look, it essentially reads out the provider Fabric on the tenant ID. This is my tenant ID. It's public. There's a lookup website where you can find it. So that's not a secret. And we will print out basic stuff like the Fabric capacity name. And the capacity ID, right? So this essentially is not a real kind of Terraform script because it doesn't do anything, which is usually the purpose. It simply gives out some information, which means it proves that this connection works, right? So let's go into that directory. Next we can run the Terraform init. That looks good. And now we can apply our Terraform config to this Fabric capacity. And the Fabric capacity is called MF Fabric Demo. MF because it's me, Matthias Falland, and Fabric Demo for obvious reasons. Okay, after the Terraform init, we can apply our Terraform configuration to the Fabric capacity, which is called MF Fabric Demo. And the capacity is obviously in my tenant. And the tenant we have defined during the login and also with the app credential. And you see, okay, apply is complete, resources added, 0 changed, 0 destroyed, of course, because we didn't do anything. But you see, this can be dangerous. That's the purpose of desired config management. And we get back the Fabric capacity ID, which basically is a message, it works. So that's fine. And so that's cool, right? What's next? I've created some more, a little bit more sophisticated demonstrations, like the workspace name that we can create and the location, and so we can then find the existing capacity, Fabric capacity, and then we can create a lakehouse and so on. Question is, how did I create that? And the answer is, basically, I used Microsoft Copilot, right? So that's a kind of a tweak. So I can show it to you. I have Microsoft Copilot here, and I have a prompt. So first of all, I have included MCP servers. MCP servers are for searching for content for agents. So agents can ask other agents for content. And I've included the Microsoft Learn MCP server. And this is the way how to test this. Oh, I know I've used GPT-5 Mini. I usually use for that, but anyway, that's okay. You see now it's saying, hey, I will use the Microsoft Learn provider, Microsoft Docs. You see it here, right? That's the search and the output. Okay, and now it's generating a valid copy job content template, including the token handlebars to provide. So I've included the Microsoft Learn Terraform provider, but I've also included the Microsoft Learn provider and the Terraform MCP server. So it basically knows everything about Fabric and it knows everything about Terraform, which is really, really great. So the output will be the copy job, simple JSON, the copy job content JSON, and the copy job example JSON. I've run the prompt before, obviously, right? And there is a TF demo folder, and there should be our, there we go. Copy job example. There we go. So it created everything. That's fairly cool, right? And our copy job content. We cannot execute bits because it's just pure demonstration. So there's one special thing in Terraform, which is that when you apply Terraform, it will adjust all resources to your advisory, which means that things that are not included in your Terraform will be deleted. This is kind of a problem, right? So now we are getting, like always in AI, a bunch of advisory, a summary and so on, right? So there is one key point you need to explore, which resources you already have. So you can advise the AI or do it by yourself. So I will undo that now. To include the already existing resources. And for that, you can use the Fabric CLI. This is Fab. You will need to install the Fabric CLI. And after you have installed the Fabric CLI, you can use it. And with FabLS, that's aligned to Linux commands, we can list all workspaces. There is a special naming schema. I've done a Fabric Friday on that topic. How is the naming structured in Fabric CLI? Basically, it uses like file endings. If you are a DOS child, you know that, right? And because you can use the same name for different resource types, so they are distinguished by the name, by the file ending or folder ending. So in this case, .workspace means this is a workspace, right? And we can list a specific workspace, but I've deleted that, so it doesn't work anymore. Basically, what we have now is my Bootstrap script that creates all the names and groups and so on that we need, the workload identities, right? So you see, we are creating a group and the Fabric resource group name, right? And then we give the Fabric resource group name appropriate permissions to run these Terraform scripts. And after that, we can work with a prompt, and this prompt really does some stuff, right? So the idea is that we create the complete data platform with Terraform, and of course we will do it in a Git repo. So basically, for our demonstration purpose, we will create a Fabric workspace and the source lakehouse and the target lakehouse and the data pipeline and some stuff, right? And we will use variables, of course, and the deployment script. But everything will work, and this is kind of the heart, out from GitHub with GitHub Actions. So we push the code to GitHub, and after we pushed it, or after some other criteria, this is deployed to Fabric automatically through a GitHub action. And for that, I need this Bootstrap setup. This is like predefined because essentially GitHub or GitHub Actions need permissions on Microsoft Fabric. And for that, you should use a group, and then you set all the configuration variables in GitHub with GitHub variable. You can do that manually in your repository, or you can do it automatically with the GitHub command line. I have documented that here with the GitHub command line, and you see the repository is this one. We will see that in a minute. And last but not least, we can start the workflow. We can start that also from the web to deploy our code to Fabric. So let's jump over to the Git repository to see what's in there. So let me jump to the web browser and github.com. github.com/ there we go. This is the GitHub repository. With my README, this all is generated by Agentic AI with this pre-prompt. So I simply write in here in my GitHub Copilot, please create this project out of this documentation, and everything is in here, right? You can see it here. So we have our deploy script, we have our main TF, we have the pipeline content, we have the Terraform variables. When we click on that, you see it's configuring the Fabric provider. It's configuring the AD provider. There's a workspace name. The workspace name is MF Terraform Fabric Demo. The capacity name is the one that we already know, and so on. We grant additional users permissions on the workspace, all that stuff. And we have the GitHub workflow, which is this one, with a Terraform YAML. And there's the workflow defined, right? Everything was created by Agentic AI. What can I do now? I can go to actions. You see, I have tested that already, and see it works. Yes, on September 9, I have tested that. So basically months ago, more or less. And now we can start our workflow either from the web or from command line. Before we start the workflow, just let me check how the demo instance looks like. So when we have a look back to the main TF, the workspace that is created is called MF Terraform Fabric Demo. Just to be sure, there is no such workspace at the moment here, right? I think that's important because otherwise, well. So I think we are good to go. Let's switch back to Visual Studio Code. And you see there is my prompt. Please create a human readable prompt that creates all artifacts in this project. And so basically this was the interaction. We have now the GitHub workflow with the Terraform YAML. This is the workflow here, right? And we can execute it. So we can start this workflow basically directly from the web. We have to go on the GitHub action page, and then we select our workflow. And because we have a workflow dispatch event trigger, which I can show you. So let's go back to the code. And when we go to the GitHub action, you see that there's a on workflow dispatch. On workflow dispatch means that this workflow can be run on request. So again, actions, workflow, and now we can say, okay, run workflow. This will create a new item here. And there we go. This took some time. So we have now the GitHub action workflow running, and you see there's a plan action, and now there's the apply action. It's currently queued, so it's organizing compute resources for that. And once it will start running, it should create our workspace and a lakehouse and some other resources. You see the first step, Terraform plan, is already running. So set up job, check out code, install Terraform, Terraform init, Terraform plan for apply. All this is running on virtual machines. So basically it's checking out the GitHub code, installing Terraform on that virtual machines, creating the Terraform plan, and showing the plan for review, and then clean up. So that's the first step. And the second step is Terraform apply. It's basically the same, install Terraform and so on. And then we have Terraform init and Terraform apply. And you see there's a Fabric workspace role, Fabric lakehouse source, Fabric lakehouse target, creating, pipeline creating. So when we now go back to our Fabric environment and everything went fine, we should have a new workspace. There we go, MF demo Terraform. With our items, looks a little bit empty, but that's due to the new user interface. Lakehouse, transfer, pipeline, source lakehouse, target lakehouse, everything is here. Everything was created. So let's do a short recap because it might be a little bit confusing. We started with the first Visual Studio experience. Let me rearrange that here a little bit. We started off with this one, right? And I showed you a very basic Terraform demonstration where we just simply read out our ID from the Fabric. And then I explained to you we need some app IDs, and we can use Fabric CLI to read out our existing environment. We need some bootstrapping because we need permissions and groups as preparation for GitHub actions. And then we do everything through prompting. And the prompting is basically a markdown document, markdown, open preview on the side. There you can see it, right? It's a little bit better to see, I assume. So Fabric demo creation prompt. with all the structure we want to have and all the stuff. And then we switch over to our subfolder. It's a subfolder in the Git repo, and say, hey, okay, please do that. So use this markdown and create my Terraform code. So we started off with this raw definition, and everything else was created from that, out of that raw definition by a prompt. And this is just so it's easier to read, right? I've created everything in a subfolder. So this is a result here: the creation of the lakehouse, the creation of the pipeline, the creation of the workspace. Everything was done by Terraform, well, that's it. It's very, very easy. And you can do it. So this repository is public. I will put the link in the description. So go ahead, and it will just work. Yeah? It's so easy, and you can do it on your own. There's a predefined workflow, of course. Since you don't have permissions on my repository, you cannot run that workflow, and you cannot deploy to my Fabric. But you can clone that repo and start over from your own. So that's from my side. Thank you very much for attending. I hope this helps. And you have the blog entry, which I took as a boilerplate to start off. And I think together with AI and agentic development, it's really smooth and it really works. Thanks for attending. See you next time. Bye-bye.